everybody. Welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Suj.
And my name is James.
You know what people love to eat, James, is chips, or they love podcasts about chips. They just love everything to do with chips. Today is People's Poll. Had a number of topics to choose from, chippy related. So yeah, we're going to have some fun talking about we're talking about the winner, one of the topics. What were the runners and riders in the People's Poll, James, and what did people want us to chat about?
The runners and riders in this People's Poll chip special were, if we were on wildcard now, what would we do? Because I think there's a potential awkwardness in terms of the kind of laser eye focus on 24, and then what about afterwards? For example, having 3 Newcastle assets suddenly looks a bit more difficult in 25, and I'm guessing a lot of people listening to this at the moment might have like Hall Gordon and Isak, for example.
Yep.
That didn't win. Neither did the idea of exploring the possibility of using all of the chips in 24, be it wildcard, Arseman, bench boost, triple captain, free hit, looking at pros and cons of each. That didn't win either, but there is a relation to the free hit here. And this is what I hope will be quite an interesting discussion. It should flow quite nicely, particularly on YouTube. We've got some graphics from FPL team to show you. What we're going to look at and discuss on this podcast is what a free hit in the 2 blank game weeks might look like. So that's the blank of game week 29, where we'll have presumably 2 fixtures postponed for the Carabao Cup Final, and then the FA Cup semi-final weekend of game week 34, where we could have up to 4 fixtures postponed. Before we go into them, just to repeat on 29, it is possible that a game will be postponed from game week 29 and still stay in game week 29. An example of that would be if the Carabao Cup Final is Tottenham against Newcastle, and Tottenham and Fulham, for example, are both out of the FA Cup, and Tottenham would be projected to go out in this round before the quarter-final stage. Then there's every chance that fixture could be played on FA Cup quarter-final weekend. And by virtue of that being before the midweek of game week 30, the fixture could still stay in game week 29. The most likely is that we'll have 2 fixtures postponed. We know the possibilities of those at the moment. So it's Villa, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, Fulham, Tottenham, Newcastle, Crystal Palace. Most likely 2 of them will go. Those will be the fixtures that affect, obviously, the teams participating in the Carabao Cup Final. And game week 34, we could have up to 4 fixtures postponed. Obviously, if we get a championship team in an FA Cup semi-final, then it's a maximum of 3 teams, and so on. And obviously, you could have scenarios where, let's say, Liverpool and Tottenham both got to the FA Cup semi-final and they're playing each other. You're only going to lose 1 fixture, obviously, rather than 2 under that sort of circumstance.
Good. Well explained.
Hopefully. What we're looking at is on screen at the moment is a graphic of kind of game week 28 to 31 to just show you the current lie of the land for those who are looking to prep further on. It's worth noting some of those who have good fixtures after in sort of game weeks 30, 31, and will definitely play in 29. For example, you look at right at the bottom of the screen here, you look at them Wolves fixtures. Everton 28, Southampton 29, West Ham 30, Ipswich 31. By the way, it's Tottenham 32. And you feel like you could run through with a Matthias, couldn't you? If he hasn't completely fallen out with Vitor Pereira after last night, which we'll talk about on the Clayton and James show tomorrow. So what I've done is I've put kind of 2 free hit drafts together based on the possibilities of the Carabao Cup Final and the games that could be postponed. This first one, which is kind of, I think, probably the least impact to FPL managers, would be an Arsenal versus Tottenham final, which is the most unlikely. And we kind of represented that by leaving Timothy Castagne in this draft on the bench, who would have obviously a postponed fixture because Fulham would be scheduled to play Tottenham if Tottenham made the Carabao Cup final, presumably postponed. So just want to run through this draft, particularly for the benefit of those. Go on.
I've been very set on 29 free hit, mainly because I've got triple Newcastle. So, and I've got double Liverpool at the moment, and we'll have triple Liverpool because I'm going to stock up on one more before the double game week. And obviously I've got some Villa players as well. well, one at the moment in Morgan Rogers. So, if it was an Arsenal Tottenham final, I'd only have Gabriel and Palmer as it stands right now. And it just absolutely wouldn't make sense for me to use the free hit
Exactly.
at that point. So it's the least likely final as it stands, though you could go and do something at Liverpool. And if they make a comeback win, at that point, free hit's gone for me, though. It is
Yeah.
completely run. And I think for a lot of people as well, because they won't be as heavily stacked up on maybe Arsenal, Chelsea. You're tripled up on Chelsea. So different story for you, though. Thinking about your transfer plans, you're going to be coming off Jackson more than likely. Colwell was a bench play, like a rotatable player, not a bench player anyway. So there are options there. But this final of Arsenal Spurs is an interesting one because it's the one that completely takes free hit off the table for me.
Yeah, and I wanted to kind of represent that by putting up perhaps what might be a free hit team if you were picking from the 8 remaining fixtures. So if it was an Arsenal Tottenham final, you obviously lose Fulham v Tottenham and Arsenal against Chelsea, unless of course those two teams are both simultaneously out of the FA Cup. It could maybe stay in that game week. So this is what I put together for a game week 29 free hit if it was a North London derby Carabao Cup final. So Sells in goal away to Ipswich, Vardio at home to Brighton, Aït-Nouri away to Southampton, Lewis Hall at home to Crystal Palace. Salah, I think, would stay in, even though it's Villa away. I put Jared Bowen in away to Everton. Might be a cheeky little differential. He's presumably back. What we saying? Sort of next couple of weeks, Suj?
He's in training, so yeah,
Yep.
imminently, and God knows West Ham need him.
Bruno Fernandes away to Leicester. Justin Kluivert at home to Brentford. Erling Haaland captain
Hmm.
home to Brighton, and that's kind of the big draw appeal of 29 is I can put him in after some shit fixtures and then captain him. It's worth saying he's got Leicester at home the week after, so that might kind of annul that. Oh, I had Haaland against Brighton, but I don't against Leicester. Up front with Haaland, Wood away to Ipswich, Isak at home to Crystal Palace. Bench kind of filled out with enablers, doesn't matter. I wanted to pick players here to show from different fixtures. Clive, it could be Semenyo, it could be Amad Diallo. There's different ways of obviously doing it. But this gives you a little pick of kind of various different pies. You've got a couple of Forest, couple of City, couple of Newcastle. It doesn't feel like a heavy all in. And I don't think, partly because I don't think the fixtures are good enough necessarily to steam into just say 3 teams. I think you'd almost want
Yeah,
a spread.
I don't know. I see. For me, I would have doubled. If I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna double up on Forest defence with the Ipswich fixture. I think Sells and Nico Williams. I think that money that I'd save on what you've got in Gvardiol there, I'd want to go another Man City attacker in Foden, probably because I can for Jared Bowen. I would say, but other than that, generally. I'm in agreement in the teams that you've picked. You can always argue the case of attacker versus defender or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could have Gordon instead of Fernandez. Like, there's loads of different. Yeah, Gordon instead
Mm.
of Bowen. There's loads of different things you could obviously do with this. I just wanted to do that to represent quite a number of different fixtures. But again,
Yep.
I think main point here would be if it is an North London Carabao Cup final, I don't think many people will be free hitting in game at 29.
Yeah, I agree with you for sure.
Yes, there will be coverage of Arsenal Chelsea players, but I think it would lead into if I've got double Arsenal defence, I want to move it on. I don't think too many have Arsenal offensive at the moment. If they do, Odegaard's, Martinelli's, they're thinking of moving that to probably Liverpool players at the moment. And Jackson owners are obviously really unhappy this morning. Defensively, they don't keep many clean sheets.
Mm.
Palmer, you'd want to hold through.
Yep.
And I think Gabriel owners have got investment in Gabriel. You could easily, couldn't you, run through, bench Gabriel Palmer, that might be all it is by the time you got to there. I don't think it would be difficult to move other players on. It's worth noting that Chelsea have 2 great fixtures beforehand. Southampton at home 27 and Leicester at home 28. So if you've got the 27 and you still own Jackson, you're not selling him till 29. But you could also say, for example, Chris Wood has not great fixtures in 27, 28. They are Arsenal at home and Manchester City at home. You use Jackson to Wood in 29.
Yep.
You could see that sort of move. This is where the storing up the transfers would certainly help anyway. I'm going to leave the same team up with now the idea of what's a little bit more likely, which would be an Arsenal Liverpool final.
Final. Yep.
And all that affects us here is from this same team is obviously we'd only gone with the one player from the Villa Liverpool match. You wouldn't go Villa players, I don't think, on a free hit. Salah. So the only thing you need to do is obviously remove Salah. But the consequence of that is you've got a lot more money, right? So I think there's a few things you'd probably want to change around under that circumstance. So would help if I'd put the right graphic in the right order here, James, wouldn't it?
Yeah, maybe
Arsenal,
Foden and Gordon, I think you put into this draft
yeah,
now. Yeah.
yeah, I think so. So Foden, Gordon, you could look at maybe spending something a little bit more expensive defensively, perhaps. I've put Gabriel there, which is obviously
I
stupid.
mean,
It can't be Gabriel because this would
no.
be on an Arsenal Liverpool postponed. So I'll get something else sorted to put in there. But yeah, I think maybe then under an Arsenal Liverpool, maybe you do go in a bit heavier with say treble City and treble Newcastle, for example. I think that maybe then the standouts once you take Arsenal, Liverpool out. But again, you can do things like double Forest defense, for example.
Yep.
You could still stay with like your likes of Eight Nori, Matthias Cunha up front. So obviously got a good fixture. They're both away to Southampton. The projection, of course, however, is for us to have a final of Liverpool against Arsenal. So that would mean no Villa Liverpool and then no Newcastle against Crystal Palace. You're going to
Villa,
say something,
sorry.
Suj?
Yeah, Liverpool Newcastle final as opposed to Liverpool Arsenal final is what you meant there.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So no Villa against Liverpool and no Newcastle against Crystal Palace. That's the
Palace.
current
Yep.
projection as it stands. Again, to repeat, there is a small possibility the fixtures could still stay in game week 29, even if they're
Yep.
postponed, if they can be played on FA Cup quarter final weekend. Now, that leaves us in a situation where I think from the previous slide, you're looking at, oh, right, I've now got to replace that treble Newcastle.
Correct. Yep.
And a lot of people will be on, say, treble Newcastle now. And I think, for example, if we know Newcastle are in the final, coming out of game week 24, and you know that Newcastle then run into City, Forest, Liverpool, West Ham, then blank, then people like Gordon become expendable, I
Hmm.
think. And you possibly looking to downgrade maybe even to the likes of Semenyo, Cliver. You might go sideways to
Ahmad.
Bumo, yeah, Amad Diallo, different example.
Yep.
So this is what I'd come up with. We kind of base it on the current projections of a free hit. If we had a Liverpool versus Newcastle Carabao Cup final. So I've gone with treble City of Vardiol, Foden, Haaland still captain. Sells in goal for some Forest defensive coverage. 8 Norrie at Southampton. Milos Kerkez, home to Brentford. Bowen I've left in away to Everton. Fernandes I've left in away to Leicester. I've put Palmer back in away to Arsenal. So hence no Arsenal coverage in this. Still Wood away to Ipswich. And I think now Cunha away to Southampton because the Isak slot has opened up. I think what I thought about here was with the money available, if you've got like no Salah, there's every chance Saka's not going to be back by then. The people would be drawn to still keep Cole Palmer. It does feel an ugly one to free hit and take a player like that out of your team, and the majority will own if they've got a fixture. Now, and get you can attack something else, but I think if you lose the Newcastle fixture, what specifically and Liverpool, what specifically do you want to attack from the midfield area? That could be that you go something like Bumo instead, right? But I just think people would be drawn to know that with the money, their two premiums become Haaland and Palmer. It's still easy enough to fit everything else in, isn't it? You've still got like a
Yeah.
premium defender in Vardiol.
Any chance Saka might be back by then, potentially?
Might be. It is a possibility.
It
I'd say
might
it's
be
probably
something to consider.
unlikely. I think Saka's probably more going to be early April, I think.
Right. Okay. So it's a little bit too early for him
You
to be
could, of
back.
course, but then yeah, it's Saka instead of Palmer. I think there's certain ones here. The treble City, I think under this circumstance, people would go with, wouldn't they? Home
For sure.
fixture.
Yeah.
You'll be able to afford to go Vardiol. At the moment, Foden's the form one. Maybe it will look like Kevin De Bruyne instead. It could be by the time it comes around, you make a saving on someone like Savinho. I think Bruno
As
Fernandes
a
would go in.
Guardiola owner, he will annoy you,
Yeah, I
even if
get
it's for
that.
one
But
week.
it's only 1 week, mate.
So
Is
yeah,
he annoying
I
you
mean,
more than Rico Lewis?
you could go triple up, right? Why not De Bruyne as well? If De Bruyne, Foden, Haaland, if he's available as
Yeah, you
well,
could go for
really go all
offensive.
in, and then save yourself the bother. I trust like Forest defensively more than I would trust Manchester City defensively.
Still an away game though, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not overly keen on Jared Bowen. I think we've seen, well, you've seen firsthand get a dig in there of Everton's improvement. I think that game's going to be awkward to call, so I think I'd almost swerve it. I do like your Wolves call though. I think Wolves at Southampton will be interesting though. Again, Southampton I think will score in that game, but
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's weeks away, isn't it?
yeah,
Um, these games are all really. I mean, you take something like Bournemouth v Brentford at the moment. I know
I
Bournemouth are
fancy
in,
Bournemouth, but
of
I think
course,
that's recency bias, isn't it, from what they've
they're in
done at the
great form at the
weekend?
moment. But you know, Brentford's a dangerous team.
Yeah.
But I think suddenly, for example, you know, if by the time you got there and Bumo's unavailable or out of form, you would be tempted, I think, looking at the fixtures to look at something like Kirkes and go with an offensive fullback who can. He's got a decent return at Newcastle at the weekend and scored a great goal, right? So having a back three like that, Vardy, Kirkes, and Ait Nori is way more exciting than putting Milenkovic or Murillo in. I just think if you're on a free hit as well,
Yeah.
Bowen could be anyone. I mean, he's obviously shown red flags at the moment. We presume he'll be
Yeah.
available by the time it comes around. Bowen could be anyone. And obviously, if you don't want to play Palmer at Arsenal, the point here is probably money won't be a problem
Yeah.
under this circumstance, I don't think. Because Arsenal and Chelsea play each other, I don't think you particularly want to steam into too much coverage. You might deem, well, actually, a lot of people are going to free hit in 29 under this circumstance. I want to do it, and I want to go something like triple Arsenal defence because it will be the sort of week where people maybe even take their Arsenal out. It's still a game at the Emirates, right? It's
Hmm.
not like they couldn't. I just think people would be drawn to keep Palmer in.
Yeah, I think I would too. And the thing that would it's the effective ownership and of those not on free hit that have got him just covering it off. It's a bit of a fearful move, a bit of a shield move, isn't it? Really, but I'd do it.
There's every chance a lot of people will land in 25 and have six players from Liverpool, Newcastle.
Hmm.
Then that will draw your eyes to, oh my God, they're not playing in 29. If you add in that you've potentially got the likes of Morgan Rogers,
Yeah.
maybe even like Ismail Assar, Mateta, suddenly you could be looking at a position where you have got seven or eight players out for game week 29. I think
Hmm.
people like investing in, say, Palace at the moment. I keep thinking this with Mateta. It's like great fixtures till 28, but presumably at the moment he's not going to play in 29. That's annoying. Then I'm
Yeah.
forcing that in as a transfer because when I hit 29, if I run through, I'm going to want to keep Salah value, Isak value, and then
Well,
probably Lewis Hall, who I bought at 4.4, right?
yeah, I was going to say that's the other thing that's really made me sway towards knowing that I'm going to use it in 29 is team value, James. I'm just doing the maths here. I've got zero point 0.6 in Hall, zero point 0.3 in Gordon, and zero point 0.8 in Isak. So that's 1.7 million, give or take, just in those three players. So half that, because I only get half that value. I'm not going to lose nearly a million in team value. Same goes for Salah. Salah's nearly a million. Trent's zero point 0.2. Morgan Rogers is zero point 0.4. I'm not going to be able to afford to lose all of that value. I'm not going to sell them. Now, the alternative is bench them and play around with my bench fodder to navigate through it, but leaves me a bit thin. And you're not going to have the optimal. Like, there's some players that I'd want to attack. I think the Nottingham Forest fixture I want to attack.
Yeah, I mean, Wood be one
Bournemouth
who
I want to attack.
yeah, but
City I want to attack.
you're also going to factor in, like, say, for example, if you free hit in 29 and you don't go with someone like Chris Wood, who's probably going to, I mean, look at his EO last week, it was
Mm,
once like 80% plus, right? He's obviously got difficult fixtures between now and then, so he probably will lose a little bit of ownership. But most people in 29 with free hit, well, I think if they don't own him, will want to put him in to cover it. So there's a
yep.
chance there you could free hit. If you don't cover it and he goes and gets hat-trick at Ipswich, you're in huge trouble, right?
Yep.
So I think people would be drawn to go with someone like that. Cunha, of course, as well, also has those really good fixtures, like I said, before and after. So those not free hitting, if he's back in the sort of form that he showed us pre-Christmas, people are going to be drawn to him, I
Yep.
think. And obviously, if Isak's unavailable, that's going to open the slot. I think for those like me who are more likely to carry through, we're not likely to get to Haaland. It's too much hassle.
Yeah. I wouldn't even. I'd take my medicine and let it be.
There would be a case to say to switch it up and then bin Mo. But I look at Mo's fixtures, it's like Mo's got Everton, Fulham, West Ham, Leicester, Tottenham, 30 to 34.
Yeah.
You could, but it's switching it up. It's if you try and force Haaland in, if you're running through, what I found looking at plans was I'm constantly looking at cheap things. So the first thing I'm like, I've got to put Tyler Diblin in somewhere because I've really got to stretch the money. It
Mm,
becomes really tough to force him in, and it's not like I don't think there wouldn't be other good captaincy options in
yeah,
29, even under this circumstance. Like, could you captain Foden on the form he's in?
yeah.
Yeah. Cunha at Southampton, Wood at
Wood
Ipswich,
again. Yeah,
Fernandes or Diallo at
yeah,
Leicester. There
yeah.
will be alternatives. Clearly, I think under this circumstance, he would be the standout. But I think with running through transfers, it's going to be tough. If you pretty much need to use 4 or 5 transfers to put him in, I would anyway, unless I
And
took
then
Salah
and
out,
then
and I don't
and
want
then
to.
and then how do you reverse it afterwards? It
We don't
becomes
want to
even
take
more of a
Salah out
mess.
early either. He's got Southampton at home in 28.
Mm,
So yeah, that's one big pool of free hitting is obviously it's easy to put Haaland in for 29, but also then, like I said, he's got Leicester at home with 30. Do we free hit him in for Brighton, but don't have him for Leicester?
yeah, like if you're not going to buy him, that's the medicine you got to take, James. Right?
That's
If his fixtures are
shocking. That's
that
shocking though, isn't it?
if his fixtures are that good, then you'd be buying him. You're trying to find a way to buy him. But like you said again at the weekend, 6-0. What did he get? Just the goal? So what was that? 6-pointer?
But
That's
it's
pretty
always what it
painful.
can be, can't it?
And it's always what it will be. There's no doubt about it. At some point, he's going to go on a tear, and everyone's going to be looking at it, thinking you're going to want him. And this might be the period. But look, if there'll be other players that can cover it off, I think, and so I'll do it for the week, get my Haaland fix, but I'm not going to then cry about it the week after when he's got Leicester. No,
Do you think you'll free hit 29 as it stands?
the only yeah I do because the only possible permutation for the final that would mean that I wouldn't would be Arsenal Tottenham because that just gives me Gabriel and Palmer and I can work around that. The Liverpool game will give me 4 players out. The Newcastle game will give me 3 players out, and those are all players that I don't want to sell. And also, there's enough money in that Liverpool Villa trio or that Newcastle trio that I want to spread it elsewhere. I don't want to just bench it. Like imagine having to leave that much money of Gordon, Isak, and Hall on the bench. Like Hall's not a lot of money, I get it, but the other two, I don't want to leave it on the bench. So yeah, I think I would. I've got no plans to buy any Palace assets at the moment, but again, that might change in the coming weeks.
Really don't think I'll be free hitting in 29.
No, you think you'll be finding a way to work through?
Yeah, I think so. I don't even under Liverpool Newcastle circumstance where I'd be coming out with 7, maybe even 8, because it's not beyond possibility that I'll buy Mateta this week. Could be down to 8. I still don't think I'm free hitting that week under
Yeah,
that
no, I would.
circumstance. I think I'd be probably dealing with Gordon and then trying to carry on. So then I'd probably deal with Gordon 25
It'd be
and then
down to
try and
8 players, so you got to figure out who. So Gordon can go. I get that. I don't mind that. Would you get rid of Rogers? Or you don't own him anymore.
I think Rodgers kind of becomes expendable from sort of game week 26, actually, basically for the rest of the season.
Trent, you'd let go.
Yeah, Trent, I'd be happy to let go. Yeah,
Your
that's an
third
easy way to find
Liverpool
some
will
money.
be Gakpo or Diaz or whoever it
I'd
is.
be
Let him
happy for
go.
that to go. Yeah.
Yeah, but
And
that's
then
in 29, right? Because you won him for Southampton the week before.
not necessarily, like I can see me going something like Gakpo to Cunha in 26 or 27, for example.
Okay.
If I had Mateta, then Mateta to like Wood in 29, or if I've held Jackson, Lord have mercy on me, Jackson to Wood in 29, as I said. Trent I could cut, I think, and take it or leave it. I've never been kind of huge on having it. Yeah, Southampton at home offers big haul potential, but City and Newcastle before that, like it's expendable if I need some money. If I want to get like Rodgers up to Boomo or something, it's an easy way to do it, isn't it? Trent down
Mm.
to like 8 Nori, Kirkes, something like that, and then Diallo or Rodgers up to Boomo, for example. Brentford have got good fixtures heading up to the blank. Or I just switch it up. It's Bournemouth enablers instead of Rodgers as well. So Rodgers, I think, yeah, he's probably becomes expendable after Villa play Ipswich in 25. Don't
Okay.
their run from then to the end of the season's meh. It's never great again. They've got a
Uh,
good run coming up now over the next sort of 3 or 4.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that you having used your bench boost has no influence on this decision anyway, really, because you'd want to be thinking about bench boosting in a double anyway. For me, I'm thinking of using my bench boost in one of the doubles later on, and wildcarding in and around that to set myself up, but also using that wildcard to help me navigate 34 when we know what 34 looks like. So if I could use my wildcard around 32, let's say, bench boost in 33 and help me navigate 34, something along those lines, then I'm kind of good. And then Asman maybe on Pep for the final three.
Look at you, you
Yeah.
sheep.
Well,
Oh, you
we shall
like that
see.
now, do you?
Well, it's not necessarily. I quite like Moyes actually. Thinking about it for 24,
Oh, nothing like it.
but to be honest, I don't care about this Asman chip. Like I'm just gonna hit it and not care. Like whatever.
So basically, just how you play the game normally.
Nah. I think I'd play more strategically generally. Like I'm thinking about it, but this one I'm just like it's just too much effort to think about. I'm just gonna hit the button on it. If it ends up being right at the end, yeah, so be it. I only think there's a 20% chance I play it on Pep at the end. I think I'd have used it before, but yeah, something along those lines. You don't need to use your wild card to set up for a bench boost, but you could use your wild card to navigate 34 naturally anyway. 34 is so far away
It
and so many
is,
games to be played in the FA Cup still before we'll know where we end up.
which makes projecting this very, very difficult, right? And it's extremely
Inaccurate.
unlikely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's extremely unlikely to be accurate. But you can only look ahead at the potential problems that may arise. For those on YouTube, what you're looking at the moment is the fixtures from game week 33 to 36. Now, so remember, 33 obviously going to be doubles, 36 going to be doubles. Fixtures from 34 could be postponed for anyone that's in an FA Cup semi-final. They'll probably be pushed back to 36, but as covered on the Chip Strategy podcast last week, fixtures involving Manchester United or Tottenham particularly may well be brought forward if those two teams are still in the Europa League. That's because the Europa League final is before the end of the season. I presume that you're laughing at
Oh,
Manchester United rather than Tottenham, boss.
of course you're making it to Europa League. You're gonna have a
Exactly.
you're gonna have a cup treble this year, James.
Mate, that parade down Tottenham High Road with our three trophies at the end of the season is going to be very special, isn't it?
Yeah,
Uh,
get the
I,
ciders
I,
ready.
I suspect not
Nah,
somehow. I'm
I'm
not that deluded.
joking in jest. You never know. You might pick up one of them, but you still got to be in them, and you are. So that's all you can do.
Let's put it a
But yeah,
different way.
it is going to be.
In terms of betting odds, Manchester United and Tottenham are top of the shop in Europa League betting at the moment, right? Now
Yep.
there's the influence of the money on English teams being in it, but it would definitely, no matter where you go, it would be projected that those two teams would reach the Europa League quarterfinals. That's
Right.
long enough. Remember, the quarterfinals are going to be sort of between 31 and 33, long enough that you potentially need to be bringing fixtures forward. You can't
Forward.
wait on the problem to happen. Exactly. So, as it stands, we've got a lot of fixtures that I think potentially appeal. What I've done, Suj, is I've put together a free hit for game week 34 based on currently, if all 10 fixtures just went ahead, which I don't know if the FA Cup semi-finals are Leeds against Sheffield United and West Brom against Burnley, it's what would actually happen, but it's obviously very unlikely.
Yep.
So this is what I've gone with for a free hit, and not everyone will be able to get to this. I've got like a kind of spending power of about 103 at the moment. And obviously I'm keeping people here that I've got value in, like Salah and Palmer. So my spending value is kind of like well in excess of 104 here. So you may have to make a sacrifice or two here, but one is you'll see in the defense is easy to do. So I've gone with this. Sells in goal at home to Brentford. Okay, I mean, people might be
Yep.
drawn to have Forest defensive coverage. It's a home fixture. Gabriel at home to Palace. Lewis Hall at home to Ipswich. Mark Cucurella at home to Everton. That's obviously an easy one, I think, to downgrade. Midfield four, get ready to dribble. Salah captain at home to Tottenham. Saka if he's back at home to Palace. Palmer at home to Everton. Gordon at home to Ipswich. Up front, Isak at home to Ipswich. Wood at home to Brentford. Cunha at home to Leicester. There's a few interesting things there. Firstly, it's not miles different from what the 29 free hit might look like. I mean, under the circumstance, for example, we said that Newcastle didn't make the final, you'd probably want treble Newcastle. And I think if Newcastle got Ipswich at home, that still very much appeals. Almost appeals more than any other, I
Yeah.
think. On the bench, I've flattened it out. So Fabianski, Castagna, Anderson, Dibbling, and that I'm mentioning that because to show you there's not a lot of wriggle room on money. Obviously, if you went into this circumstance and Saka was not available still, then Saka to Fernandez, that sort of thing's going to be easy to put the money in. Now, of course, if all 10 fixtures went ahead, you're obviously not going to free hit in game week 34. This next image shows you the current projections as they are now. So a couple of things to note here. There are two teams that we've currently got projected to double in 33 and play in game week 34. Those are Crystal Palace and Newcastle. There they are again. Palace, though, you're looking at a potential double of something like Bournemouth at home, Newcastle away, and then Arsenal away in 34. So in terms of carrying out, that's not great, is it?
No, it's not. But if you look at it, would you rather that versus Cunha? And Cunha's 34 fixture is Leicester at home is decent, but he's not got great fixtures either side. So if I was buying one to carry through, I'd carry Mateta rather than carry Cunha. But if I was free hitting in 34, I'd be buying Cunha. So if I had Mateta to carry through, I wouldn't. I don't know.
There are four teams here on the current projection. Again, I must repeat, this is not how it's going to be. This is just a projection. There are four teams we currently got projected to double in 33 and blank in 34. Those are Villa, Bournemouth, Liverpool, and Manchester United. So you're going to want bits of those teams. I think Villa even you could look at and go, well, it's Newcastle and Liverpool, but it's still two home games at Villa Park. If I was free hitting in 33, there's every chance I'd be putting Ollie Watkins in, for example. Bournemouth, you projected sort of Crystal Palace away, United at home. Liverpool would obviously be of interest, Leicester away, Villa away, and then Manchester United in that double would be of interest, right? Wolves at home and Bournemouth away under that circumstance. So again, this is kind of measuring the difficulty in having a good team in 33 and a good team in 34. This is why free hitting across this will be so much easier for the majority of people to manage, is to do it in one of 33 or 34. There's no guarantee it'd be this bad, by the way, because remember, this projection has bringing Bournemouth against Manchester United forward from game week 34 to game week 33. Now, the projections are done based on bookmakers' odds. And believe it or not, at the moment, Manchester United are shorter in the betting for the FA Cup than Newcastle. So it's very easily done, potentially, that you take Newcastle out of 34 and then put Bournemouth and Manchester United back in 34. Now, under that circumstance, 34 ain't going to look quite so good. In fact, you're more likely to go Bournemouth players than Man United players as it would stand right now. And that treble Newcastle, for example, would be off the table. This is what I've come up with for a free hit in 34. Or to show you the problems, sorry, first. From 34, from the original team that we showed you. So the original team, obviously, is picked based on all 10 fixtures going ahead.
Yeah.
Now, the only thing that we actually lose here based on the projections is Salah, obviously, and two Chelsea players. That's it.
Yeah, when I was looking at that team, I was like, I've got 7 of that 11 right now anyway.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, I'm not going to keep, it's a long stretch to assume I'm going to keep those 7 players all the way through, but they are players that are pretty consistent in Gabriel, Salah, Wood, Isak, Gordon, Hall, Palmer. Like, I haven't got a reason to sell any of those players. They've been performing great. Like they're the stronger players from that setup anyway. The reason I don't own Saka is because he's not fit.
Yeah.
I mean, I can easily get in a keeper, a defender, and a striker. Take a punt on 3 players, sure.
Well,
so this is it. I've got more than half this team I've already got, James.
The fixtures that you lose, right, as it stands. So Liverpool against Tottenham, we've already spoken about maybe losing Liverpool players on the path towards 29, possibly. You'd lose Bournemouth against Manchester United, doesn't feel like a huge problem. If you know they're going to blank, you can obviously move the players on. But of course, factor in what we just said, they're probably double in the week before. So again, it's the balance here that's the problem. Other fixtures that you lose from 34 under this circumstance: Chelsea against Everton, and who's the other one? Manchester City's fixture, which is at home to Aston Villa. Now, Cucurella wouldn't be part of most people's teams anyway, right? So that's like not a problem. So under this circumstance, you're possibly looking at, in terms of an actual problem for 34, possibly only kind of really Palmer Salah being your real big problems, possibly if that's the way it worked out. But of course, this doesn't show you what the team's doing doubling the week before is, right? And then suddenly, if you've got, let's
Yep.
say, for example, City double in 33 and then blank in 34, which is a possibility. It's not projected at the moment, possibility. Right, that's a different game, isn't it?
Yep.
If you've got Haaland in 33 has got like Everton away and Villa at home, okay, this becomes really difficult to look beyond. But what I looked at here and looking at this and thinking, I think what might be key here is actually Newcastle specifically.
Hmm.
Because I think there's a lot of people who have invested early on the likes of Hall and Isak are just thinking, right, I'm really happy with these guys. It's worth saying Newcastle's fixtures all the way through, other than when they might blank, are good, bar that period of 25 to 28. So if you held that far, and I'm talking about holding Isak and Hall and benching them if they blank in 29, then that run from 30 onwards is pretty good, building towards 34. This made me think two things specifically by impact of Newcastle, because I'd probably buy Gordon back. I think every chance
Okay.
in that run to the build up. It made me think more about free hit in 33 and maybe even wildcard in 35 if it landed as nice as this. So this final one we're going to show you is what I'd actually put together for a free hit in 34 based on the four current projected fixtures being postponed. So to repeat, that's Chelsea against Everton, Manchester City against Aston Villa, Liverpool against Tottenham, and Bournemouth against Manchester United.
Yep.
So the team I put together is this: Leno in goal. Fulham have Southampton away. Gabriel at home to Palace, Hall at home to Ipswich, Aït-Nouri at home to Leicester. Midfield four, Gordon at home to Ipswich, Odegaard and Saka home to Palace, Bumo away to Forest. Up front, Cunha against Leicester, Wood against Brentford, Isak captain against Ipswich. And I saw you, Suj, quite rightly shake your head at Bumo away to Nottingham Forest. Look at the top of this image and look at the money in the bank.
8.5 million. Yeah, I get it. Is it? Yeah, that's the only one that I don't particularly like. But yeah, where are you going to spend the money?
We talk,
Where are you going to spend the
yeah,
money?
but we talk about maximizing your potential, right? I'm saying under the circumstance that those four fixtures were postponed. And by the way, I don't think this would be any better if it's Bournemouth against Manchester United rather than Newcastle against Ipswich because of Isak. You're
Yep.
not spending the money.
Yep.
So there's that to factor in.
Yeah, I was
Now,
trying to think where are all the midfielders that are priced more expensive? City, Chelsea, Liverpool. You can't
now
upgrade him.
all it needs is, like I said, say City v Villa went on in 34, and then that's way more attractive, right? Because now you're spending the money on Haaland and Foden and Vardiol, right, as examples, and it becomes easy enough to fit in. But if you lost under these circumstances, we're talking about losing Haaland, Palmer, and Salah together, right? In a free hit here. You're not spending the money under this circumstance.
I
So
was
then
even
again,
looking at Spurs. Is you can't even go and buy Sonny or something because you're not playing because Liverpool is your fixture,
why in the
and
world would you do that anyway?
just to spend the money, just to spend the
No,
money.
I
Do
get,
you
but
know
that's
what I
why I
mean?
put
It's like
Bumo
where?
in.
Yeah, I get
I
it.
put Bumo in and went,
Is
well,
the
no
most?
Forest defence. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I get it. Absolutely. There's no midfielder at a higher value that's actually available that week. I think.
Looking at alternatives like Mitoma against West Ham or Bowen at Brighton, like, it wasn't great in
Yeah,
terms of the alternative
yeah,
to
yeah.
spend the money. I think like you can put a good free hit team together, and that's more of a kind of an all-in strategy, right? It's treble Newcastle, treble Arsenal, double Wolves, cover against Southampton, a defensive player, and an attacking player each from the Forest Brentford fixture. That feels more like a all-in free hit. And the 29 example I showed you was like different pieces, more like a talisman kind of free hit. looking at this made me think more about, yeah, I could run through that possibly. Like, how bad would it be? Maybe, yeah. Maybe more like free hit 33.
And for the listeners, when will we know, right? Because a lot of people are like, I'd rather just tell me what the fixtures are going to be and then I'll know. So for those that are trying to figure out 29, we're waiting for the second leg of the Carabao Cup semi-finals, which are next week, right? Midweek, Wednesday and Thursday. You're playing
No, it's not.
Thursday.
No, it's not
No,
next midweek. It's the
it's the week
second
after,
midweek of the FA Cup fourth round.
right?
It's the
So we still
second
got
midweek.
you. You're playing on the Thursday at Liverpool, right? And
Yeah.
the Arsenal are at Newcastle on the Wednesday. So I think that's the third and fifth and sixth of February.
So on the Thursday night, we will know which two teams are playing in the Carabao Cup final, and obviously the impact of two fixtures on 29 are definitively postponed from the weekend of the Carabao Cup final. But I must repeat, that
We
does
won't
not
know. Yeah,
mean that the game is postponed. You need to be really careful about this, right? Because all it takes is Tottenham Newcastle to be the Carabao Cup final. You go, right. Sell my Newcastle players because they're blanking in 29. They are a fatigued Newcastle that just beaten Arsenal loses to big spending Birmingham from League One in the FA Cup fourth round. It's not that big of a reach, trust me, because Newcastle may well rotate in that fixture. And then Tottenham lose at Villa, having just played at Liverpool 3 days earlier. And suddenly you've got fixtures that are potentially available to go into game week 29 from both of Newcastle and Tottenham's games if either Crystal Palace or Fulham go out the FA Cup as well. Like under that circumstance, it's not that impossible that game week 29 wasn't even a blank at all.
right. So that will kind of know by game week 25. You think?
Careful. So obviously, let's just say, for example, Tottenham Newcastle's a Carabao Cup final, Tottenham Newcastle, Fulham Palace all go through, right? In the
Yeah.
FA Cup. You think, okay, definitive. Right. Well, what about the FA Cup fifth round? The FA Cup fifth round is played on the first weekend, I believe, of March.
In between 27 and 28.
Right. There are then two more weekends. So 28, and then the 29 is the Carabao Cup final. The weekend of the FA Cup quarter final is another 2 weekends later. So from FA Cup fifth round to FA Cup quarter final weekend is 4 weeks.
So international break in there.
Correct. So in terms of your span of real life, not fantasy life, there are 4 weeks on the calendar from the FA Cup fifth round to the FA Cup quarter final. So under a circumstance that Newcastle and Crystal Palace both got eliminated in the FA Cup fifth round and Newcastle in the Carabao Cup final, could that fixture still be played in game week 29? Yes. So when do I know that, James? Well, like
Before
possibly,
28. Between
probably.
28 and 29, something around
Probably
that.
before 28, but it could even be in the build up to 29. You would certainly know before 29 happened. But again, this is a good reason potentially to be storing the transfers in the build for 29 rather than just using them. You know you got stuff you specifically want to do. I could look at a move like Gordon to Bumo and think, well, yeah, on the fixtures, I like that anyway. But also, how gutted are you if you potentially sell him and he's still playing in 29? Because if they did play in 29 and you were going to free hit that, you'd probably go, yeah, I'd have Gordon. Now, I think it's less of a relevance because you're like, well, I just don't own Anthony Gordon in 29. And under that circumstance, you'd no longer be free hitting. You'd probably have the bonus of people like Hall and Isak are back available for you in that week, maybe a Mateta and stuff like that as well. We have to know this is a possibility that a fixture that is postponed in 29 could still happen in the game week.
Good.
In terms of knowing the outlook for 34, what we can definitively say is the FA Cup quarterfinals are the weekend before the midweek of game week 30. Any team that reaches the FA Cup semi-final is almost certainly going to have their game week 34 fixture postponed and go into a different week. This is different. We know that because the midweeks of 33 and 36 are available. Even if it is a fixture, say, for example, Wolves versus Leicester is postponed, there is still no reason to play that in a European week. It will be played in game week 33 or 36 where it doesn't clash with Europe. That's a near certainty. So it's a near certainty that any fixture in game week 34 will move. So you will know the 34 outlook before game week 30 starts. What you might not be able to be certain of is which week the fixtures go into.
But again, the other thing is depending on what the draw is for the quarterfinals, the probability might be you might be
Well,
getting
this is
a
it.
Premier League team drawing
When we
someone
do
really.
when we do it, we'll do another chip strategy podcast again after the FA Cup fourth round. And at that point, every time we do it, the projections become clearer and clearer.
Yeah,
At
yeah,
the moment, it's wild to predict which four teams will be in the FA Cup semi-final. We could all look at it now and go, oh, I think Liverpool, Man City get to the semi-final. Yeah, but they could draw each other in the fifth round. Then
it's true.
one of them's definitely going to go, right? So you can't even do it on the four favourites because obviously as soon as one of them even draw each other, that's why we say the draws are so important. The projections will move. So
Correct.
34 is a long way off. I still think what I would say is before kind of putting this together as a task, I was probably leaning more to free hit 34 and I'm easing on it. But I'm only easing on it in the sense of thinking maybe more about doing it in the double in 33.
Okay. I was game week 29. I'm still pretty much 29, but again, depends on what happens in the Carabao Cup semis, because if it's Arsenal Tottenham, then I'm definitely not 29. If it's Liverpool Newcastle, I'm almost certainly 29. Another combination of to be confirmed, I would say. Though I can see the value of 34 as well, potentially, though I've got so many of those players, I'm not so sure I'm going to need to do it around them. Of course, stay tuned wherever you are listening to the pod, because we will be doing updates regularly as this all unfolds. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you're on YouTube, hit the notification bell, and you'll be notified as soon as any additional content goes live. If you want to support the show, it's patreon.com/Planet FPL. You get access to James's fixture planning spreadsheet. Those predictions are also available on FPL.team, where you can start planning out your team for the rest of the season. You can also plan your usage of the Assman chip on FPL.team as well. Other than that, though, stay tuned. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Stay safe. Look after yourselves. Ciao for now.
Thanks, everyone. Play it your way as always. Cue music, please, man child.